Here are the 50 insane music facts about the Beatles you don't know. Number 1. The Beatles' last released album was Let It Be in May 1970, which came out after Abbey Road in September 1969. Interestingly, Let It Be was recorded before Abbey Road, but was released after they finally broke up. Number 2, the album's cover, featuring the Beatles walking across a zebra crossing, is one of the most famous images in music history. It was shot on the zebra crossing outside Abbey Road Studios in London. The image has since become a popular tourist attraction. Number 3, A Hard Day's Night is indeed the only Beatles album where all the songs were written exclusively by the songwriting duo of John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Released in 1964, this album marks a significant point in the Beatles' career, showcasing their growth as songwriters and solidifying their global fame. Number 4, the last official photo shoot of the Beatles as a group took place on August 22, 1969, at John Lennon and Yoko Ono's home, Tittenhurst Park in Berkshire, England. The photos from this session were later used for the cover of the Hey Jude album, which was released in 1970. Number 5, Beatles. Paul McCartney originally created the melody for the song Michelle as a playful way to impress women at parties by pretending to sing in French. Though his tactic never worked, John Lennon later suggested turning it into a real song, leading to the creation of the classic Beatles hit. Number 6, the original lyrics for the Beatles song Yesterday started as scrambled eggs. Paul McCartney woke up with the melody in his head and used phrase "scrambled eggs, baby, I love scrambled eggs" to remember the tune, until he could write the final lyrics. What began as a light-hearted placeholder turned into one of the Beatles' most famous and enduring songs. Number 7, there was a real Eleanor Rigby. The Beatles song was inspired by actress Eleanor Braun in a shop named Rigby and Evans Limited in Bristol. However, a gravestone for someone named Eleanor Rigby is located in Woolton Cemetery, close to where McCartney and Lennon first crossed paths. Although McCartney says the name was coincidental, the gravestone has led to speculation about a possible indirect influence. Number 8, the Beatles song A Day in the Life. The famous final chord of the song required 4 people: John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, and their roadie Mal Evans, playing an E major chord together on 3 pianos. They needed 9 takes to perfect the timing, and the chord resonates for a full 53 seconds, creating one of the most iconic endings in music history. Number 9, Ringo Starr wrote Octopus's Garden after learning about a fascinating behavior of octopuses while on a boating trip in Sardinia. During a conversation with the yacht's captain, Ringo discovered that octopuses collect shiny objects to decorate their underwater homes, which inspired the song. At the time, Ringo was feeling overwhelmed and longed for a peaceful escape, which led to the creation of this whimsical and beloved Beatles tune. Number 10, Eric Clapton played the guitar solo on the Beatles' While My Guitar Gently Weeps. George Harrison, frustrated that his bandmates weren't taking the song seriously, invited Clapton to join the session. Clapton was initially hesitant, but Harrison persuaded him, and his presence elevated the recording. The involvement of Clapton encouraged the other Beatles to give the track the attention it deserved. Number 11, the Beatles' final live performance was their iconic rooftop concert on January 30th, 1969, at the Apple Records building in London. Joined by Billy Preston, they performed Get Back and other tracks, with Like I Want You, She's So Heavy, also John and Ringo borrowing their wives' coats due to the cold. Number 12, the Beatles' musical comedy film in 1964, A Hard Day's Night, was released in the US, but the American music executives initially considered dubbing over the Beatles' voices in that film, with American actors due to concerns that their Liverpudlian accents might be hard for American audiences to understand. But fortunately, the idea was scrapped. The Beatles' authentic voices were kept, and the film became a massive hit. Number 13, Norman Smith, who frequently worked as the Beatles' sound engineer, secretly recorded the hi-hat sections for Can't Buy Me Love. The story goes that Ringo Starr's original drum parts, laid down in Paris, had issues due to a tape ripple, resulting in a loss of treble when played back at Abbey Road Studios. To fix this, Smith allegedly stepped in to redo the hi-hats, all without the Beatles knowing. Number 14, Paul McCartney composed When I'm 64 at the age of 16, well before the Beatles were formed. In their early days, the band would sometimes play the song at the Cavern Club, with McCartney on piano to fill time if equipment issues occurred. Number 15, Beatles song Penny Lane is a real street in Liverpool, significant in John Lennon and Paul McCartney's childhoods. The street, which inspired the famous Beatles song, holds fond memories for them. However, the street itself was named after James Penny, an 18th century slave trader who opposed the abolition of slavery, a fact that wasn't widely known when the song was written. Number 16, Paul McCartney introduced Oh Darling during the January 1969 Get Back sessions, inspired by 1950s rock and roll. The Beatles revisited the song several times, but only achieved a satisfactory take in April 1969, recording 26 versions. McCartney worked on the vocal delivery over several days to capture the raw intensity he wanted for the final recording. Number 17, the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was a collaborative project involving all 4 band members and producer George Martin. The album was recorded over 400 hours and 129 days, featuring 13 tracks with a total runtime of 44 minutes. Number 18, in May 1963, Please Please Me reached the top of the UK album charts and stayed there for 30 weeks. It was succeeded by With the Beatles, which then held the number 1 spot for 21 weeks. Prior to this, the charts were typically dominated by film soundtracks in easy listening music, making the Beatles' success a notable change in the music scene. Number 19, the Beatles revolutionized songwriting with She Loves You by starting with the chorus, which gave the song immediate impact. They skipped a traditional bridge, using the refrain to connect the verses instead. This, along with changing chords every 2 measures in a static harmonic scheme, contributed to its catchiness and helped make it one of their biggest hits. Number 20, these are the rare and unseen photos of the Beatles at Liverpool's Cavern Club show in 1961, taken before their debut single. The images reveal a young Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, and a partially visible Pete Best dressed in leather trousers and cotton tops. Number 21, the Beatles initially worried they might not be well received in the US, unsure if American audiences would take to a band from the UK. However, their 1964 performance on a popular TV show captivated millions, leading to a wave of enthusiasm that established them as major figures in American music. Number 22, John Lennon's first band, the Quarrymen, was indeed the precursor to what would eventually become the Beatles. The band was formed in 1957, and after Paul McCartney joined, he brought along his friend George Harrison. The group went through several name changes, including Johnny and the Moondogs, the Rainbows, and the British Everly Brothers, before finally settling on the Beatles. Number 23, John Lennon once mentioned that Help and Strawberry Fields Forever were the only songs he felt were truly personal. He described them as unique because they reflected his own experiences and emotions, unlike other songs where he would create stories or imagine different scenarios. Number 24, Got to Get You Into My Life, is often interpreted as a love song about a girl. However, Paul McCartney later revealed that the song was actually an ode to Number 25, despite their incredible musical talent, none of the members actually learned to read music. They were all self-taught musicians who could play various instruments like guitar, piano, and drums, and they were brilliant songwriters. However, they composed and created their music purely by ear and instinct, without the ability to read sheet music. Number 26. Did you know Keith Richards believes John Lennon and George Harrison could have fit into the Rolling Stones, as both bands shared a love for the same music? Despite their rivalry, Richards praised Paul McCartney and highlighted their collaborations. Number 27. During the Beatles' final rooftop performance on January 30th, 1969, the police were called due to noise complaints from nearby businesses. Ringo Starr later expressed that he had hoped for a dramatic end, imagining being dragged away by the police while still playing his drums. But in reality, Police Constable number 503 quietly cut the power to stop the concert. This performance remains iconic as the band's last live show. Number 28. Paul McCartney was inspired to write She's Leaving Home after reading a Daily Mail headline, A-level girl dumps car and vanishes, about 17-year-old Melanie Cole leaving her home and family. But Melanie Cole was later found living with her boyfriend just a week after the report. Number 29, Paul McCartney and John Lennon's last jam session together occurred in 1974 during a relaxed, boozy studio session with Stevie Wonder and Harry Nilsson. This session was later released as a bootleg recording called A Toot and a Snore. It was a rare and relaxed occasion, reflecting the close but complex relationship between Lennon and McCartney after the breakup of the Beatles. Number 30. When Bob Dylan initially heard the Beatles song I Want to Hold Your Hand, he mistakenly thought they were an influenced folk group. He misinterpreted the lyric I Can't Hide as I Get High, leading him to believe their music had a more rebellious, message. Number 31. That Canadian journalist Sandy Gardner came up with the term Beatlemania. It first appeared in the Ottawa Journal in November 1963, where it was used to describe the global craze surrounding the Beatles as a new phenomenon. Number 32. That the title A Hard Day's Night was inspired by a comment from Ringo Starr. On March 19, 1964, after a long and exhausting day of filming, Ringo humorously referred to it as a hard day's night, which led to the film's title. Number 33, Paul McCartney explained that the Beatles broke up due to a mix of personal, business, and musical differences. He also emphasized that his desire to spend more time with his family played a significant role, reflecting his focus on personal priorities and family life. The breakup was a complex situation involving various factors. Number 34, George Harrison's song All Those Years Ago, released in May 1981, was a tribute to John Lennon, written just 5 months after Lennon's death. The recording featured all 3 remaining Beatles, with Ringo Starr on drums and Paul McCartney on backing vocals, making it a heartfelt homage to their late bandmate. Number 35, Paul McCartney's first instrument was indeed a trumpet, gifted to him by his father for his 14th birthday. His father, Jim McCartney, had played trumpet in a jazz band during the 1920s, which likely influenced his choice of gift. Number 36, Paul McCartney wrote, Maybe I'm Amazed, as a tribute to his wife Linda during a difficult time when the Beatles were breaking up. Linda's support helped him through the emotional turmoil, and the song became a heartfelt expression of his gratitude and love for her. Released in 1970, it quickly became one of McCartney's most cherished solo works. Number 37, Paul McCartney was inspired by his Catholic background to write Maxwell's Silver Hammer, after learning about a distinctive Vatican tradition where a cardinal hammers the forehead of the deceased pope with a silver hammer to confirm his death. Number 38, the Beatles significantly improved during their time in Hamburg, where long performances boosted their skills and confidence. John Lennon noted they had to innovate to keep their shows fresh, while Stuart Sutcliffe highlighted their remarkable growth. Despite challenges that almost made them quit, they persevered and started gaining larger audiences in the UK in 1961 and 1962, leading to their global fame. Number 39, John Lennon initially suggested including Adolf Hitler, Mahatma Gandhi, and Jesus Christ on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. While a cutout of Hitler was made, all 3 were ultimately left out to avoid controversy. Number 40, the Beatles' song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. The BBC banned this track, suspecting it referenced though John Lennon insisted it was inspired by his son's innocent artwork. Number 41, John Lennon got the idea for the Beatles song, Good Morning, Good Morning, after hearing a Kellogg's Cornflakes commercial on TV. The catchy jingle from the ad inspired him to create the track's title and theme. Number 42, according to Alan Williams, an early Beatles manager, John Lennon would occasionally nap in an old coffin kept at Williams' coffee bar, the Jacaranda. The coffin, which was abandoned, served as a humorous spot for Lennon to rest. Number 43, John Lennon found songwriting to be a challenging and often painful process. Just days before his death, he described it as absolute torture, expressing frustration with his work and often doubting its quality. He felt that most of his songs were inadequate, except for a few that seemed to come effortlessly. Number 44, John Lennon's song Julia from the White Album was unique because it was performed solo by Lennon without any assistance from the other Beatles. Similarly, Paul McCartney's Blackbird was the only song he sang alone. Both songs are notable for their solo performances within the context of the band. Number 45, the Beatles' first appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show on February 9, 1964, drew an estimated 73.7 million viewers, around 34% of the U.S. population, making it one of the most watched events in TV history. This performance marked a key moment in the rise of Beatlemania and helped launch the British invasion of American music. Number 46, In 1907, the Beatles bought the Greek island of Leslo, along with 4 smaller islands for each member, for $95,000. They initially planned to create a private retreat, but quickly lost interest and sold the property a few months later. Number 47, prior to joining the Beatles, Ringo Starr was the drummer for Rory Storm and the Hurricanes and was highly regarded as one of Liverpool's top drummers. Despite being left-handed, he plays on a drum kit designed for right-handed players, which helped create his distinctive drumming style that became an essential part of the Beatles' music. Number 48. In 1964, Glasgow's council actually announced that men and boys with Beatle haircuts were required to wear bathing caps at public pools. The decision came after concerns that the longer hair from the famous Beatle cuts was clogging the pool filters. It's a funny reflection of how the Beatles' influence even reached public policies in unexpected ways. Number 49. Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger and Beatle Paul McCartney once explored the idea of launching a record label together. However, the Beatles ended up creating their own label, Apple Records, in collaboration with Capitol Records, and the plan with Jagger didn't materialize. And last, number 50, John Lennon and Paul McCartney last met on April 24, 1976, at Lennon's New York home. While watching Saturday Night Live, they saw a joke offer from producer Lorne Michaels inviting the Beatles to appear on the show for $3,000. Although they briefly considered going as a joke, they decided against it because they were too tired. This missed opportunity would have been a notable television moment.